Forged letter warning about wolves on the loose, part of Canadian Forces propaganda campaign that went awry. This is an absolute bombshell expose, which shows how the Canadian military engaged in a psychological operation to scare the living daylights out of some people in Nova Scotia. So in this video, we're going to go over this one, guys, and you won't believe where they're taking this one from here. Now, if you're new to this information or this channel, I'll point out the fact that I've been talking about propaganda for quite some time. I explain how governments are using this. I would advise you to check out this video if you haven't seen it. COVID-19 is a carefully choreographed pandemic, and the government is the real virus. And as you can see from the thumbnail image here, I read directly from the book on propaganda called Propaganda, written by Edward Bernays, where he says things like this: "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of." In this video, Dan Dix of Press for Truth explains how the techniques outlined in the book Propaganda for how to manipulate an entire population into going along with their own enslavement are now being used by the current invisible government with COVID-19 in order to trick the entire world into willingly going along with serfdom. And that's indeed what they are doing. That's what psychological operations are all about. That's what psychological warfare is. As we see from this Wikipedia article, now it's Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think in their introduction here, they pretty much nailed it. It says, psychological warfare, or the basic aspects of modern psychological operations, or a PSYOP, have been known by many other names or terms, including MSIO, PSYOPs, political warfare, hearts and minds, and propaganda. The term is used to denote any action which is practiced mainly by psychological methods with the aim of invoking a planned psychological reaction in other people. Various techniques are used and are aimed at influencing a target audience's value system, belief system, emotions, motives, reasoning, or behavior. It is used to induce confessions and reinforce attitudes and behaviors favorable to the originator's objectives, and are sometimes combined with black operations or false flag tactics. It is also used to destroy the morale of enemies through tactics that aim to depress troops' psychological states. Target audiences can be governments, organizations, groups, and individuals, and is not limited to just soldiers. Civilians of foreign territories can also be targeted by technology and media so as to cause an effect in the government of their country. And obviously, I think one of the oldest and probably most blatant examples is the Orson Welles War of the Worlds broadcast, where everybody assumed that this was real. The radio station would say, well, we had a disclaimer at the beginning, and it's the listener's fault for not paying attention. Well, they knew people don't pay attention to the disclaimer at the beginning, and they knew other people would be just roaming around on the radio and tuning in after the disclaimer and would essentially think that this was real. And what it did, folks, is it scared the living daylights out of the population into thinking there was an alien invasion. What that was actually the military conducting some research into how society was going to react to such a terrible fear, scary thing. They were engaging and figuring out how are they going to react. Well, it's far beyond the point of doing research into how are people going to react. They know how are they going to react, and now they are actively doing things to push society into areas that they want to go, like wars. Wars in the Middle East, for example. I put out this video which really explains how this is done at the higher levels, guys. Bilderberg documents leaked, Iraq war plan exposed. An incredible treasure trove of documents has been leaked online detailing a number of Bilderberg conferences dating all the way back to the 50s. In this video, Dan Dix of Press for Truth shows how the Bilderberg Group is clearly steering society in the direction they choose with the ability to affect the outcome of nearly any given situation by use of their sphere of influence. And in this video, I go on to explain how it was at the 2002 Bilderberg Conference where top military officials were, as we see from the leaked documents, were telling members of the Bilderberg Club secretly that Saddam Hussein was the next big threat, that he had weapons of mass destruction, that they were going to have to launch a humanitarian mission to go in and stop this big bad boogeyman. Remember, this is a year before the rest of the world heard anything about this. So Bilderberg put it into the minds of these influential leaders, and then a year later, what happens? They launch a war in the Middle East. That's how things are done, utilizing propaganda. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. And now we have this. And as I said, guys, you're not going to believe just the lengths that the Canadian government went to in this particular propaganda campaign. And you're not going to believe where things are going from here. So we're going to break all that down for you right now, guys. But before we do, I just ask that you check me out here at pressfortruth.ca/donate if you appreciate the efforts of this channel to bring you this information. Here you can contribute a one-time donation with PayPal. You can contribute Bitcoin here or become a patron by clicking on that banner. There's other cryptocurrencies that you can contribute here. You can use the Patreon alternative to join up for a monthly reoccurring amount. Here you can send an e-transfer to dan@pressfortruth.ca, or if you're old-fashioned like we are and prefer to keep it old school, we also accept cash, checks, equipment, and words of encouragement. You can send those things here. Dan Dix, P.O. Box 1521, Squamish, BC, V8B0B1. Again, links are located in the description below if you want to help support the efforts of this channel to bring you this information. All right, guys, let's break this one down. Again, you're not going to believe the lengths they're going to here to scare the living daylights out of regular Canadian citizens. It says here, a letter from Nova Scotia government sent out to residents to warn about a pack of wolves on the loose in the province was forged by Canadian military personnel as part of a propaganda training mission that went off the rails. The letter told residents to be wary of wolves that had been reintroduced into the area by the provincial and federal governments and warned the animals were now roaming the Annapolis Valley. The letter, which later became public, sparked concerns and questions among residents, but was later branded as fake by the Nova Scotia government, which didn't even know it was the military who was behind the deception. The training also involved using a loudspeaker to generate wolf sounds, the Canadian Forces confirmed to this newspaper. Guys, let that sink in for a second. They created a fake letter from the government, put it out there saying that there's dangerous wolves, and they set up loudspeakers in the area projecting out wolf noises. This isn't just research, you know, this just isn't just a training exercise. They're actively engaging in this psychological operation to scare people using loudspeakers. This is unbelievable. The fake letter was part of a new skills being tested by the military as it hones its expertise for launching propaganda missions at home and abroad. The letter was developed by information warfare specialists with the Halifax Rifles, a reserve unit. They not only forged the logo of the wildlife divisions of Nova Scotia's Department of Lands and Forestry, but they also attributed the letter to a real Nova Scotia government employee, even though they didn't have permission to do so. A phone number was on the letter, which residents were to call if they had any concerns about the wolves, and that was traced by this newspaper to the work number of an Environment Canada employee who also appears to be a Canadian Forces reservist. The Canadian Forces revealed its role behind the fake letter last week to the Nova Scotia government, and then on the weekend to local news media. Media outlets reported military staff had written the letter, but they didn't know why. Emma Bryant, a professor at Bard College in the US who specializes in researching military propaganda, said what the Canadian Forces did was a major violation of ethics. This was way over the top, Bryant said. It's a very dangerous path when you start targeting your own public with false information and trying to manipulate them. And oh my God, it frustrates me so much that the government is actively trying to silence me and shut me down as being fake news or as putting out false information, when they are literally actively engaging in propaganda campaigns to distribute false, fake information designed to scare Canadians. And yet, no, I need to be shut down. It's just crazy. Bryant said the deception has nothing to do with wolves. It was likely an exercise in the testing of the military skills in trying to manipulate the population with false information. That's a good point. It's not about wolves here. It's about scaring the population with false information and training the military how to do that. You start a rumor about wolves on the loose, and then you see how the public reacts, she added. And I'll add to that, and then you add in some wolf noises from these loudspeakers, and you really gauge how they react. Similar deception operations were tried by contractors of SCL, a propaganda company which had worked for the US and British militaries in Afghanistan and other locations in Asia. In those cases, false information was transmitted to villagers to convince them not to send their children to religious schools where they might be radicalized. But instead of being truthful, the contractors concocted an information campaign claiming that pedophiles were operating in the religious schools, and parents shouldn't send them there because their children would be in danger of being molested. Department of National Defense spokesman Dan Lee Bouthillier said the fake letter wasn't meant to be released to the public, and an investigation is underway to determine how that happened. The letter was an aid for the propaganda training. Le Bouthillier said he didn't know why the loudspeaker was set up to transmit wolf sounds, and that will be investigated. So yeah, the letter is just an aid for the propaganda training. It's just training is all. And then when asked about the loudspeakers, yeah, well, what about that? He's like, oh, not too sure about that. We'll investigate that. The training initiative did not follow the established approval process and was not okayed by senior leaders, he added. The Nova Scotia propaganda training comes as the Canadian Forces spools up its capabilities to conduct information warfare, influence operations, and other deception missions aimed at populations overseas and, if necessary, the Canadian public. Bryant revealed on Monday the Canadian Forces spent more than $1 million in training its public affairs officers in skills to influence targeted populations. In July, this newspaper reported a team assigned to a Canadian military intelligence unit monitored and collected information from people's social media accounts in Ontario, claiming such data mining was needed in order to help troops working in long-term care homes during the coronavirus pandemic. The collection involved comments made by the public about the provincial government's failure in taking care of the elderly in the province. That data was turned over to the Ontario government, with a warning from the team that it represented a negative reaction from the public. This newspaper reported at the same time that the Canadian Forces planned a propaganda campaign aimed at heading off civil disobedience by Canadians during the coronavirus pandemic. And this is where things get really wild, guys. Do you remember, it was a couple of months ago now, how I exposed the fact that the military was engaging in what appeared to be a psychological operation to get the population used to seeing military in the streets. I put out this video. This is how you condition the masses for the militarization of COVID-19 84, where I showed them parading around in a training exercise that was meant for vehicle maintenance. Meanwhile, it has a very clear psychological effect on the minds of the masses as they see the military parading around in the streets. Links to all this stuff will be located in the description below, guys. The plan used similar propaganda tactics to those employed against the Afghan population during the war in Afghanistan, including loudspeaker trucks to transmit government messages. The propaganda operation was never put into action, but those trucks that I saw just a couple of months ago all had the loudspeakers on them. In addition, some Canadian military officers have suggested creating fake Facebook and other social media accounts for carrying out deception operations, as well as harnessing social media accounts of Canadian Forces members, military-friendly academics, and retired senior military staff to challenge opposition politicians and journalists who raise controversial issues regarding the Canadian Forces. My God, guys, I'm up against a behemoth here in the information war, as you can see. The Canadian Forces stresses that it follows ethical guidelines in its propaganda operations, but others inside the military say that isn't the case, pointing to the Nova Scotia operation as a prime example, as it violated Canadian privacy law in the criminal code when soldiers forged documents. And get a load of this, guys. The fake Wolf letter was dated September 9th, just 2 days after the Chief of Defense Staff General John Vance met with senior military leaders to explain the value of ethical decision-making and the importance of maintaining the credibility of the CAF by being honest and transparent in everything we do. Really, eh? Honest and transparent in everything we do. And then just 2 days later, launches this psychological operation, lying to the Canadian people, forging government documents, scaring the absolute daylights out of the Canadian people. And what are they doing this for? What is this leading towards, especially when we're in the midst of this pandemic? Why are they faking these documents? Why are they testing on getting people afraid moving forward? It's just insane. And if you think that wasn't bad enough, you know, they've been exposed for engaging in this psychological warfare. Well, get a load of this, guys. Now the Canadian military wants to establish a new organization to use propaganda and other techniques to influence Canadians. The Canadian Forces wants to establish a new organization that will use propaganda and other techniques to try to influence the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors of Canadians according to the documents obtained by this paper. The plan comes on the heels of the Canadian Forces spending more than $1 million to train public affairs officers on behavior modification techniques of the same sorts used by the parent firm of Cambridge Analytica, as well as a controversial and bizarre propaganda training mission in which the military forged letters from a Nova Scotia government to warn the public that wolves were wandering in the province. The new Defence Strategic Communication Group will advance national interests by using defense activities to influence the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors of audiences. This is like straight out of Edward Bernays' propaganda, the book written in 1938. According to the document dated October 2020, target audiences for such an initiative would be the Canadian public, as well as foreign populations in countries where military forces are sent. The document is the end result of what Chief of Defense Staff General John Vance has called the weaponization of the military's public affairs branch. The document is in the draft form, but work is already underway on some aspects of the plan, and some techniques have already been tested on the Canadian public. There you have it, folks. Links are going to be located for all of this in the descriptions below, but we are the guinea pigs. The government is actively, blatantly lying to you. And not just that, they're attempting to get you ramped up into a fear state. Why? So they can emotionally control you. Your ideas, your opinions, your thoughts on what the solutions ought to be. This is why this is just crucial information to get out there, guys. So please click the thumbs up button, share this video, let people know that the Canadian government is actively engaging in propaganda campaigns to scare the daylight out of Canadians, and they want to set up new organizations to continue this practice. It's absolutely unbelievable, guys. So share this one, let people know they are now literally trying to set up a new organization, and this comes on the heels of already being exposed for engaging in this unethical, illegal activity. Unbelievable stuff, guys. Again, share the video, click the thumbs up button. Don't forget to check me out at pressfortruth.ca/donate if you appreciate the efforts of mine to bring you this information. And that's all for today, guys. I want to thank you once again for tuning in. Stay tuned. We're going to have more video reports coming soon. This is Dan Dix reporting for Press for Truth. We all want truth. will set you free, free, free.